was the 26th of January 2021. New Delhi was decked up to celebrate India's Republic Day with the usual pomp and glory of Republic Day parades. But there was one more parade that New Delhi was not ready for, and that was a tractor parade spearheaded primarily by farmers from Punjab protesting against 3 farm laws passed earlier in the Indian Parliament. Things quickly took an ugly turn. The farmers' protests that had been bursting at the seams at the Haryana border spilled over into the capital city and turned violent. The protesters changed their assigned route, heading straight towards the Red Fort. They clashed with the police, vandalized public property, and a section of these farmers climbed the walls of the Red Fort and hoisted the Nishan Sahib flag. These images shocked the nation. What was seen as a peaceful protest led by farmers was now a national security threat. Farmers continued to block key border highways connecting Delhi with Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, causing a loss of thousands of crores to the economy. It became an extremely sensitive topic for the rest of 2021 until Guru Nanak Jayanti on the 19th of November that year, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the repeal of the 3 farm laws.
गुरु नानक देव जी का पवित्र प्रकाश पर्व है। ये समय किसी को भी दोष देने का नहीं है। आज मैं आपको, पूरे देश को ये बताने आया हूं कि हमने 3 कृषि कानूनों को वापस लेने का, रिपील करने का निर्णय लिया है।
This surprise move by the Prime Minister effectively brought the farmers' protests that had lasted over a year to an end. While the political connotations of the entire saga have been discussed in detail, it is this question of policy which hangs in the balance till this day. I spoke to Tushar Gupta, journalist and editor at the Atom channel, about these frozen farm laws and what prompted the government to repeal them.
3 important points. Number 1, when we talk about the 3 farm laws, there is this general misconception that what the Modi government was introducing were the first of their kind reforms. It's not like the farmers were not trading with the private sector. Somehow across 2020, 2021, a perception was created that in India, agriculture means MSP, farmers mean MSP, or as if MSP is some sort of oxygen for the farmers. That was a very incorrect perception that was peddled across those 2 years. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, what the farm laws were doing was essentially what was going on across states for more than 90% of the agricultural produce. The idea of the Narendra Modi government was that if a farmer is in Punjab, a company is in Tamil Nadu, they can trade freely without any inhibitions or without any bureaucratic restrictions or without any legal restrictions, so that the laws are same in Tamil Nadu, the laws are same in Punjab or in Arunachal or in Gujarat. So those 3 farm laws, when you talk about the contract farming especially, were about streamlining the entire agricultural process pan-India. Point number 2. Point number 3, when the government withdrew these 3 farm laws, it must be understood that the government had been talking to the farmers of Punjab, the ones who had gathered at the Singhu border, for over a year. In 2020, August, September, the negotiations had already begun. And the negotiations, ironically, were not even about the laws. They were about something else completely. Not many people even today know that the 3 laws had no mention of MSP, nothing about it. It had nothing to do with the APMC Mondays of Punjab or MSP. Yet, the government, after trying for over 15 months to convince the farmers, buckled under, one would say, but I wouldn't say that phrase. I would say they just thought it's too much of trouble for a solution that was nowhere in horizon. So I think that is what prompted them to withdraw the law.
Gautam Chikermane, Vice President of the Observer Research Foundation, remarked that this was a national tragedy.
The first thing is that these reforms are very, very necessary, particularly for the benefit of small farmers, small and marginal farmers. Secondly, there is an old establishment which has its vested interests lined up in the past, which seems to be against any reform. They forget that the tractors that they use, the huge BMWs and Mercedes cars that they drive, are a product of the 1991 reforms in manufacturing in the non-agricultural sector. The 3 farm laws that you are talking about would have done to agriculture what the 1991 Statement on Industrial Policy did to manufacturing and services. The fact that a small number of people are able to squeeze out and prevent these reforms from happening is a tragedy. It's a national tragedy, given that almost half of our people are based on, their livelihoods are based on agricultural farms or labor. So it is extremely sad that these farm laws were not passed.
You see, apart from the deep political fissures triggered by the protests, at the core of the opposition was the fact that the laws did not guarantee minimum support prices (MSPs) and the fear that they would pave the way for MSPs to be removed altogether, leaving government-assured price floors unprotected. The more simplified version sold to the farmers was that the laws were anti-farmer and would lead to corporatization of agriculture, leaving farmers unprotected from private players. Now, the three laws in question are the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Act, the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act, and the Essential Commodities Amendment Act. Now, let's look at the first one. This law aimed to, number one, open up agricultural sale and marketing outside the notified APMC mandis for farmers. Number two, it allowed for interstate trade without barriers. And number three, it allowed for electronic trading of produce. This would have expanded farmers' access to markets in regions beyond their own, effectively breaking the monopoly of government-regulated APMCs, paving the way for direct trade between farmers and private buyers. The second law was the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Act. This law created a national framework for contract farming for private buyers, which aimed to protect the farmer from price fluctuations.
They would have made the entire transaction between the private company and the farmer more pro-farm. I'll give an example. In one of the laws on contract farming, the government had stated that, let's say, I'm the farmer, I'm trading with the private company, and I negotiate a final price during the time of a contract. Now, 6 months later, if the market price of my crop is more, the private company would be obligated to pay me the market price, not the contract price. However, if the market price is lower than the contract price, the farmer would still get the contract price. So in both the cases, the farmer wins. This was the original thinking of the government.
And finally, the third law, the Essential Commodities Amendment Act. It excluded cereals, pulses, oilseeds, edible oils, and onions and potatoes from the list of essential commodities, deregulating the production, storage, movement, and distribution of these food commodities. It aimed to remove stockholding limits on such items, except under extraordinary circumstances such as a war or a famine, or price rise exceeding 100% in the case of perishable produce like onions and potatoes, and 50% for non-perishable items like pulses and oils. In a nutshell, these laws would have eased up direct trade between farmers and private buyers, removing legal barriers and arbitrary regulations out of the way. But they would have removed one more element from the equation, and that is the middlemen, which explains why the opposition to the laws came primarily from Punjab.
You look at the farmers of Punjab who are guided by the middlemen, also known as arthiyas. They are the bridge between the farmers and the government or the Food Corporation of India or any procurement agencies. These middlemen, they fear that if the farmers move away from MSP crops, what is their relevance? Think of a broker who thinks that if you're going to go to the owner themselves for renting a flat or buying a flat, what is their relevance? So that is how I imagine arthiyas. And that is where the entire problem is. When you look at those swanky SUVs and people coming into protest at any camping site, these are the arthiyas who are worried about their incomes. And now, why is it only about Punjab? Because you look at Haryana, you look at Himachal. Himachal is a very interesting case. There's a great horticulture market. They all are trading with the private sector. The oranges of Kinnaur, the apples of Himachal, they are famous across the world. The lavender of Jammu. And I'm giving this example because these are Himalayan states. Himalayan states, agriculture is rather difficult. Logistics is relatively difficult. You look at Meghalaya, for instance. Pineapples being exported to the Middle East. So why have these farmers been able to progress with time, evolve with time? Because they have been diversifying. They have understood the market dynamics. They've understood the private sector. Whereas in contrast, the farmers of Punjab are still stuck somewhere in the 1960s. Call it the security of MSP, call it convention, or call it the stubbornness to not diversify. That's how I see it.
The farm laws would have helped small and marginal farmers who comprise more than 80% of all farmers in India, helping them bypass the APMCs, which contain exclusionary provisions, undue commissions, monopolies, and market fees. These would have helped farmers choose their buyer instead of being beholden to associations that decided for them, boosting their incomes as a result. They would also lead to a more dynamic and logical agricultural market, promoting barrier-free interstate and intrastate trade, helping farmers cater at competitive prices to regions where the demand was high. This would have benefited both the farmer as well as the consumer. And in the case of states like Punjab, these reforms would have promoted diversification away from wheat and paddy, which in the eye of many policymakers is the need of the hour.
When you think agriculture, Punjab, think wheat and paddy. That's it. 90% of the cultivated area in the state is only dedicated to wheat and paddy. Now, here's the problem. Both of these crops are water intensive. So the farmers have to spend a lot of money extracting groundwater, which takes a toll on the overall input costs. Now, that is where the problem for the farmers is intensifying. You grow paddy, you need groundwater, the groundwater levels are falling, and suddenly your cost has gone up. Nevertheless, because of the conventional MSP trends that have been going on, farmers are still motivated to go for paddy and wheat only. They don't really want to diversify. Point number one. Point number two, the government understood this problem. Earlier in 2024, before the general elections, there was another wave of protest when the farmers had gathered in Ambala. Piyush Goyal then had also met the Punjab Chief Minister and have met the farm unions in Chandigarh, and they had offered a very simple proposal. We give you a 5-year contract with no upper limit on procurement. You please diversify, grow pulses. The crops we are currently importing from abroad, we want the farmers of Punjab to grow that because that will improve their incomes, improve the groundwater levels, and kill their dependence on the middlemen. The farmers somehow did not relent, they did not agree to it. They were perhaps motivated by the Aam Aadmi Party, a lot of political undertones to it, but that is how it happened. Now, point number three. When you look at the GT Karnal road in India, it starts from Amritsar, goes until Calcutta. In Punjab, there is a stretch from a place called Rajpura, which is around 40 kilometers from Chandigarh, and it stretches to Ambala, which is where the Punjab-Haryana border is. Now, only a week ago, I was at that stretch. I was driving at that stretch, and it's rather unfortunate that around 8 kilometers of this GT Karnal road has now been turned into a base camp for the farmers, just how Singhu was. So across those 8 kilometers of the GT Karnal highway, and mind you, this is one of the most important highways for the state from an economic perspective, that has been blocked by the farmers. And that is what's going on again. Why are they blocking it? The farmers are somehow complaining that the paddy procurement this year in the Kharif season is not up to the mark. If you track the center's dashboard for crop procurement, the procurement is on track. But somehow there is a glut. The farmers of Punjab are not understanding that supply demand are the most essential principles of any economy. They are growing far more paddy than the market desires, and they are growing far more paddy by exploiting their own agri-ecosystem, which is the soil, the groundwater levels. So eventually this problem is not going to solve unless the farmers really diversify. And that is what the government, the center that is, had told them in April 2024, we'll give you the security, we'll give you the contracts, we'll give you, the option to negotiate either with NABARD or agencies like that, or even the private sector if you must. But the farmers are just not listening. Let's say the farmers of Punjab keep growing wheat and paddy for the next 10 years. Even if they're given double, triple, 5 times the MSP, they can't regenerate the groundwater levels. The government can't do that for you. The farmers cannot do that for you. Any political party can't do that for you. So if you look at the larger picture, BJP or no BJP, Aam Aadmi Party, no Aam Aadmi Party, the farmers of Punjab need to understand they must diversify, move away from water-intensive crops, move away from wheat and paddy, which they are growing in far more surplus than is required, and perhaps improve their incomes. There is one farmer in Punjab who made it to national headlines for one simple reason. He moved away from paddy, cultivated mushrooms, and his annual income was more than ₹1 crore. So if he can do it, why can't the other farmers of Punjab?
Now at this point, despite the removal of the 3 farm laws, Punjab's farmers remain in a crisis.
Here's something I wrote in 2020 in December, and had written wherever this protest goes, the end loser would be the farmer of Punjab. And today, 4 years later, agriculture is prospering in the neighboring states of Haryana also, Himachal also, Jammu and Kashmir also. You look at the lavender cultivation, for instance, in Jammu. But in Punjab, the farmers are in a crisis. Now, the obvious question is, the laws were repealed, the farmers were heard. Why is the agri crisis still there in Punjab?
The central government and the farmer associations in the state remain at a standoff. One of their demands is greater MSPs, and this is where the logical reasoning behind minimum support price or MSP is stretched thin. While paddy and wheat produce are the main recipients of the MSPs, a section of farmers in Punjab want MSPs to be coded into law and expanded to all crops. This means that the government would buy at a certain insured price any of the crops produced by farmers, even as it is the farmers that decide what to produce and in what quantities. But can the seller really decide what the buyer should buy? The result of such sweeping MSPs would mean unmanageable food inflation. Now, for most policymakers, MSPs are not the way forward to push for diversification, and the three farm laws were a better and natural solution. It is also not as if these reforms came out of the blue in 2020. India had been considering such reforms for decades and under various governments.
Over the past 20 years, there have been about 20, 25 reports. So when people say that there has not been adequate discussion or discourse or debate, I think they are all off the course. The various reports include, for instance, Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia's, who in 2001 came out with a report on the Task Force on Employment Opportunities. Among other things, he said that after full consideration of the issue, the Essential Commodities Act should be repealed. This is part of the previous government, as you know. Another scientist that is often cited for agricultural reforms is Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, who has come out with 5 or 6 reports. In each of the reports, he has mentioned, for instance, in his 2004 report, he said immediate amendments to the APMC Act is necessary. In his 2005 report, August 2005 report, he says Essential Commodities Act appears to have outlived its utility. In his December 2005 report, he said that sometimes results in the APMC structure, sometimes results in double taxation of the same product, often leading to cartelization for a few brokers or artiyas is middlemen, and non-transparency in price setting to the disadvantage of farmers. In his December 2005 report, he said that the Essential Commodities Act needs to be in suspended animation, and if it is revived, it should be only in an emergency situation for a limited time for a specific commodity in a specific area. In his 2000, I can go on and on. The chief economic advisor Kaushik Basu had said in his February 2012 economic survey that mandi governance is an area of concern. You need reforms in the APMC Act. Raghuram Rajan, in his 2013 economic survey, had said that it is necessary to complete the market reforms, all which includes APMC reforms and the repeal of Essential Commodities Act. The chief economic advisor Arvind Subramaniam, who has been supporting the farm protests, said APMC operations are hidden from scrutiny. I'll just conclude with the Joint Parliamentary Committee that was formed under Chairman Hukumdev Narayan Yadav, who said that APMCs have become a hotbed of politics, corruption, and monopoly of traders and middlemen. He said working it is against the interest of farmers. He said that market fees and commission charges are legally to be levied from traders, but the same is being deducted from farmers. He said that we need a radical reform of the APMC Act if we intend to provide justice to farmers. Now, if there has been so much discussion, debate, including a joint parliamentary committee of January 2019, then I don't see all the fuss other than just the worst kind of politics that is possible, a politics that is favoring rich farmers, rich middlemen, and is against the poor farmers and marginal farmers and the labor there. Why the small farmers and farm labor is supporting these rich farmers, I'm been unable to figure that out. Perhaps it's a lack of communication. Perhaps the government did not speak very well, clearly, did not reach out to the farmers. I have no idea. But when you just look at it from the point of economic logic, I can't see better laws that are needed and that have been discussed, but unfortunately have been repealed.
Finally, the question on everyone's mind is, what now? Can these agricultural reforms be brought back from the dead, or is the nation doomed to struggle without any reforms altogether? The answer is somewhere in between. While states can take the lead in terms of initiating change, including crop diversification and improving farmer incomes, the changes are unorganized, scattered, and remain difficult for the farmers to use them to their best advantage. The protections related to contract farming that the 2020 reforms offered also do not exist in the current scenario. So while certain regions will embrace reforms better than others, India's ability to enact sweeping reforms in one of the most consequential sectors of our nation remains in question.